Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Byington, and in this video we're talking about Fantomina by Eliza Haywood. Um, for her biography, we know about as much of her as maybe Afra Ben, where there are lots of question marks. Like some things we do have evidence of, but still a lot of speculation surrounding a lot of their life and what what these women did while alive. Now, we speculate she was possibly born in 1693. This is kind of based off of, in particular, this third bullet point of assuming she would have been in her early 20s because of her name being recorded in a play's program, a performance of Shakespeare's Timon of Athens. So, and that's when she's in Dublin. Now, maybe she was married, maybe not, but there's documentation of her writing about her own personal marriage that she calls quote unquote unfortunate and refers to herself as a widow. But again, since she is a writer, maybe some of this is an exaggeration, some of it is real, some of it isn't. There are new emerging views on this. This is kind of like one of those things where, because there are so many question marks, the thing that scholarship points to can change by the minute. Now, we do know her as being an actress, like the evidence here of her being in the Shakespeare production, and a playwright. Like Afra Ben, she wrote in more than one genre, but we really know Eliza Haywood for her novels and novellas. So, she is writing at the time when what we recognize as the novel, or even the novellas, that really becomes a predominant form of literature that's being published at that time. So beforehand, a lot of what people were reading was, I mean, unless it's like a treatise on something, it's going to be, or a collection of short stories, it's going to be poetry. And even if you look at things that are, let's see. So let's say this isn't a copy of the Iliad, but this is what I use when I teach European literature, that anthology. Let's say this is my copy of the Iliad, and it would really look like this. It's a pretty fat textbook, but the Iliad is, it has a story in it, but it's not a novel. It's not drama. It's poetry. It's one long war poem, basically. So when we move to the novel, instead of reading narrow things down the page, even like plays, like a Shakespeare play, to use that as an example, since I was just talking about her being in a Shakespearean production on that previous slide, that's still considered uh, somewhat mostly verse. It's not going all the way across the page every time we have a line, if you see what I mean. So instead of reading directly down the page and the image just being like an arrow, and we're like an antenna getting these flashes of images, when you're reading prose, you're getting a much longer, more exaggerated scene and tone that's happening because you're not just getting like one little stage direction telling you what it is. There's a description about how the person feels and how they are behaving and so forth. This, in particular, when I'm saying novels, some other major novels that come out at the time would be Tom Jones or Tristram Shandy. Um, but those wouldn't necessarily fall in this particular genre that we associate with Eliza Haywood, which is amatory fiction. Okay, these are kind of like, these are romance novels, and It's kind of like what you think of, like those bad novels you see at like the grocery store with the really muscular guy who's always conveniently not wearing his shirt, and the damsel in distress who's there on the cover with him. And so it's kind of like that kind of not similar idea. Um, there's lots of steamy stuff happening, relationships, and then not so much relationships, but flings, stuff like that. The role of the stereotypical innocent young woman is not so much that she is quote unquote taken, but that she pursues him and allows herself to be taken, like you see happening in Fantomina. They often do not have a happy ending. It ends in misery. So in Fantomina, in phase one, it says we have in the first line a young lady of distinguished birth, beauty, wit, and spirit happened to be in her box one night at the playhouse. So here's our setting initially. We're at a theater, and she is in her box. And we're not just saying like it has her name on it, but there would be a sort of social expectation of you're this social class, you sit here. You're that social class, you need to sit over there. So it indicates to us that she has this wild idea that I see these men pay attention to these women down here in the lower boxes, and they dress a certain way, and I'm just so curious to see what would happen if I did that. And so she does it. Therefore, thought it not in the least a fault to put in practice a little whim, which came immediately to her head, to dress herself as near as she could in the fashion of those women who make sell of their favors of prostitutes, and set herself in the way of being accosted as such a one, having at that time no other aim than the gratification of an innocent curiosity. It's quite a dramatic curiosity that she has. So she does it, and she dresses in the attire. So when I say this, at this time, it might be like it's not necessarily that she's wearing something more revealing. Certain colors or certain garments would indicate, could be indicative of you do this, you make sell of your favors, as it says there. So it could be like that, but also when she is going into that particular space, sitting in a different box at the theater, all the men are like, well, this is for sure a prostitute, even though they even make comments of, gad, she is mighty like my fine lady such a nun, and naming her own name. Like they're like, "Hey, you really look like this girl we know," and they're like, "Oh, I guess you're not because you're dressed like a prostitute and you're sitting down here where the prostitutes sit, so can't be her." So not the first time she's fooling people around her with these disguises. So the element of Marxism pertaining to social class, how like easily constructed and deconstructed someone's social class can be based on essentially their quote unquote costume. Like you expect a certain type of person to wear a certain type of thing and to act a certain type of way, to talk a certain kind of way, as we see in the second disguise. Okay, so before I go there, yeah, so she meets this guy and she gets stuck in this kind of situationship, beau plaisir. And so the literal translation there is basically a beautiful pleasure. So she has a relationship with him, sort of a situationship. Again, I should just use that word. It even says at one point she loved Beauplaisir. And probably not so much that, but it tells us that she's really young. She's a young lady of distinguished birth. And she essentially doesn't have anybody really strictly watching her. Her mother is away because in the end, the mother comes back, and that's when she gets in trouble. Um, so her guardian isn't really put their foot down much. And because this is an upper class person, she has money to just spend on servants and guards to help her get like do all these things. So she rents a place. Let's say like she's renting an Airbnb basically to sleep with Beauplaisir. And she even at one point breaks down telling him like I'm not really who you think I am, and he doesn't believe her. And um, she like continues to see him, even though it says she cries about it, like that she kind of changed her mind. And it's almost like, essentially it is sexual assault. She changed her mind and didn't want to sleep with him, but she still, after that, weirdly continues to see him because she somehow has feelings for him. But it says he grows tired of her, and so she stalks him all the way to Bath. So I always show you London on a map of or on Google Maps, and Bath would be about a couple hours to the west of London. And I'm talking like trains, and they're going by like horse and buggy then. So a little while longer. So she follows him there, and she changes her disguise to a lower class character who she names herself Celia. It says she blackens her hair and her brows, and she's pretending to be a worker in the inn that he is staying in Bath. And he's ordered chocolate, and she brings it to his room, and it says he catched her by the pretty leg, which the shortness of her petticoat did not in the least oppose. Then, pulling her gently to him, asked her how long she had been at service, how many sweethearts she had, if she had ever been in love. And it tells you that these are like the kinds of questions a man would ask a simple woman. So, he's not even talking to her in the same way that he was talking to Fantomina, like because he has kind of assumed from Fantomina, who she calls herself when she's in the first disguise as the prostitute at the theater, he has like inferred this whole idea when he's sleeping with Fantomina that she is somebody's mistress, which was like a thing. I mean, not that like it ever stopped being a thing, but one of the few ways you could have like some kind of autonomy and authority in your life as a woman in 18th century England would be to be a prostitute, but not like as they would say, not work in a common cat house, but to be upper class, as in to be a mistress. That means that some gentleman with a lot of money is basically your keeper. They're paying for your apartment and all of your clothing and so on and so on. He thinks that Fantomina is like, she is upper class because she must have a keeper. She's a high class mistress. And he doesn't talk that same way to her that he is talking to in which he talks to Celia. But then it says he gets tired of Celia too, and she has kind of seen this pattern and recognizes it the way it happened with Fantomina. She sees it happening while she is portraying herself as Celia, and so she waits until he's gonna go back into town, and now she has another idea. Uh, this character is Mrs. Bloomer, the widow. And this is a really important character because widows were very desirable women. If you weren't going to be a prostitute, if you needed some autonomy and control over your life as a woman in the 18th century to be, and not just that, like as far back as maybe the ancient world, to be a widow would make you a very desirable woman because you inherited your husband's estate. And in most cases, you were afforded the luxury of managing said estate. Whereas if you had a husband, you had to always have a male guardian managing things for you because your poor little woman brain couldn't do it. And so to be a widow now, he's interested because not just because she's good looking, but because he knows he's not as stupid as he might be, even though he slept with the same woman twice and didn't realize it. Um, and he's gonna do it again. So he's interested in the widow. And then when they get back into the city, while he's still seeing Mrs. Bloomer, and she knows he is because it's the same person, um, then she tries to communicate with him as Fantomina again, but then she makes up the fourth character, Incognita. Incognita is interesting. If you're looking at the matter of social class of all her other characters, where we have the perhaps very eligible young woman of upper class, like might be interested in marrying her because if she's an upper class young woman, then she might come with a pretty nice dowry, meaning it's the sum of money her family will give to the husband if he marries her. And so that should make her pretty desirable, not just because she's pretty and upper class, but with Celia, it really is just the looks, and she's just kind of like this brief fling, and she's lower class, like that line in The Miller's Tale about Allison. It says she's good enough for a gentleman to bed, but even better for a yeoman, so a commoner to wed. So he only sees her for sleep, where Celia, worth sleeping with, like he's not actually going to pursue some kind of long-term relationship with her. And with Incognita, well, she must have some kind of way of taking care of herself because we're back in another apartment, like a nice Airbnb again, right? But it's like all the windows are shut up. It's in total darkness that they're doing their thing, and she wears a mask, a vizard. That's kind of like what you see those little masks at Halloween time. It's the one that only covers, like, it sits on the bridge of your nose and covers your eyes. And they often have, oh, you see them maybe at Mardi Gras too. Um, they have some kind of design or wings on the edges. So it's a vizard. And so it's covering just this part of the eyes and the eyebrows and the bridge of the nose there. So that's how she's disguising herself. And it's all fun. But then they have kind of a little bit of some indifferences, and just so happen at that same time that things are getting a little difficult with Beauplaisir, her mother returns. And it says her mother has heard about some of the behavior of her daughter, like not the sleeping with Beauplaisir because she couldn't have known about that, but remember early on, and when she's in the disguise of Fantomina, at one point she lies to the guardian about why she didn't come home that night. So she's doing some stuff like that, taking off to Bath without necessarily anyone's approval, running around on her own. The mother does not like that. And on top of mommy being home, it says that she now has this other situation in which she found the consequences of her amorous follies would be, without almost a miracle, impossible to be concealed because she is now with child. So it tells you, like, yeah, she's a really clever girl, and that if her mother hadn't come back so soon, would have devices, so like money and cleverness, to figure out a way to have the child and probably send it to a foundling hospital. Remember, I talked about those in the 18th century history video. Um, so she can't really do anything about this, and she's at a ball when she goes into labor. and this is when her mother's going to find out. The doctor comes in, and because this is, I've talked about this in some other videos too. At this time, there is not really like a strong understanding of women's health and reproductive health. So, a regular physician comes in, and he tells the mother, well, she is in a condition in which I can't help her. You need a midwife. And that's when the mother knows. And so she has the baby, and the mother makes her tell her who is the father, and they bring Beau in. And he's like, I know who the young woman is, but I have never been with her. And then she confesses that all the disguises of which she was. And the mother is so freaked out by all of this that so Beauplaisir will pay for a good education and life of the baby, so everything works out fine with that. But she's so freaked out by her daughter's behavior, she sends her to a nunnery. And the thing about this is, yeah, so back on that one slide where it says the general endings of amatory fiction suggest like it usually ends in misery. So this sounds like, a cold, harsh slamming of the door on the end of days of adventure for this young woman. But the thing about her being sent to a monastery in France is that at that time, a lot of the French nunneries had a reputation of not being so strict, being a little lax. So the curiosities that the young woman might have had might not have been seen the end of their days. Okay, so that is all for Fantomina. Thank you for watching.